I'm gonna give you the 4 best exercises that you can utilize to bulletproof your hamstrings, and we're gonna start right now. What's up everybody, it's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you wanna be more explosive, you wanna dominate your opponents on the field, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a beast. So when we're talking about training our hamstrings, and what does it mean to bulletproof our hamstrings? What does that concept even mean? And I think that we've gotta think about it from a perspective of sprinting. If we look at the best sprinters in the world, think about Maurice Green back in the early 2000s, think about even Usain Bolt, who's super long, right? Just have these massive hamstrings that you could just, they're just huge, right? They're enormous. And when we think about the size of those hamstrings, that's what I'm talking about. How can these guys run at top end speed and rarely have hamstring issues? You know, Justin Gatlin went throughout his entire career with minimal hamstring issues up until, this year at the Olympic trials was like one of the first major competitions that he actually struggled with his hamstring. Okay, so why is it? A lot of it has to do with mechanics and sprint mechanics. If you watch somebody like Maurice Green, he actually was slightly more prone to hamstring issues because when he came out of the block, his torso was so far forward coming out of the blocks, it was almost too steep and it put a lot of stress on his hamstrings. So bulletproofing your hamstring can, in theory, be directly related to your technique. I believe that 100%. But it's also related to the muscular actions that you can train it, the range of motion that you're training your hamstrings inside of the gym. We're gonna be focusing on actual range of motion and some isometric work. And then finally, we're just going to be focusing on targeting and isolating the hamstrings. Your hamstring learns, your nervous system learns how to coordinate synergistically with other muscle groups throughout your posterior chain. One of my favorite all-time exercises to bulletproof my hamstrings is going to be a sliding hamstring curl. And the reason why I love this is because this is the first movement that is pretty advanced. It's like going from a leg curl to a little bit more of an advanced position, because now we're gonna be doing a little bit of a glute bridge. And you can use, Sorinex has this slider here. And this is at Eastside Barbell here in Eugene, Oregon. This place is amazing. They've got everything, right? So you can utilize this, or you can use furniture sliders. At Garage Strength, we use furniture sliders, and it's simple. Okay, so what we wanna do is we wanna see that if I can get down into a little bit of a glute bridge position here, I can get my heels on this carrier, right? So I'm gonna drive my elbows in, and I wanna squeeze my shoulder blades, and I wanna get my hips to extend up and use my hamstrings to focus on knee flexion. And so what's gonna end up happening then is you're gonna be using more of your lower back and your glutes for hip extension, and then your hamstrings are gonna be responsible for knee flexion. And this is this is a really good exercise that I haven't done in a little while that's just gonna hammer your hamstring. So I like using these with our athletes at least twice a week. You can do 3 or 4 sets of 15 to 20 reps. And the thing that is impressive is that a lot of athletes early on, when we're talking about hamstring work, they'll start to cramp in their hamstrings when they're doing the sliders. They'll start to feel a little bit of a spasm because their body hasn't learned how to recruit and coordinate from an intermuscular perspective. So that's one of the big key factors, is that now we're starting to utilize every part of the hamstring, and your actual nervous system learns how to fire appropriately, and it improves the strength and the speed at which you utilize your hamstring. Okay, so that next movement that I love to utilize to bulletproof our hamstrings, remember, we've got to think about, a lot of times, a lot of coaches believe that when we're sprinting, the hamstrings are doing it might be more dominant from an isometric muscular action. I don't fully believe that or agree with that, but I do believe it's important to train the isometric muscular action. What I also like to do is go through that full range of motion where we have hip flexion that leads to that hip extension. Okay, so that's the whole goal of this movement. So we wanna have a dynamic movement that's gonna be fast, it's gonna recruit your hamstrings to move rapidly. If we have explosive hamstrings, we are very likely to be fast, to jump high, to dominate, and to just have overall speed. The best athletes in the world in all sports have extremely strong and explosive hamstrings. So this is one movement that I like to utilize. It's a little bit of it's sort of like a kettlebell snatch from a unilateral position. So we can pause here, isometric position. Okay, so we go 1, 2, and then come through and hold. We wanna hold this, a little bit of a hip lock position here, and we wanna hold this hip extension, And then we're gonna come back down, load the hamstring, 1, 2, boom. And then hold that. So now we've got a little bit more stability. Hold, boom. And the other key factor is that throughout that workout, for me, my right side tends to be my weak side. So that's why I was demonstrating my left side first. But this is my right side tends to be very, very fatigued, and it doesn't coordinate as well. I have a little bit of a hip that shifts in a little bit here. I'll go here, boom. You can sort of see that there. 1, 2, boom. But what we can do then is that we want to also train our hamstring and our feet together. So we want to think about absorbing and pushing here. We don't want to be here with our toes. We want to have a large pad through our whole foot. So that's what we want to think about while you're going through that entire kettlebell snatch. And it's going to be isometric action. 1, 2, boom, explode, hip extension quick, okay? This movement is phenomenal. I would do it once or twice a week. You can overload it a little bit, but think about the speed and just think about general coordination. It's gonna help you extend those hips rapidly because you're trying to bulletproof those hamstrings. I'm gonna give you a movement that I would bet a decent amount of money you've never heard of or you've never seen. So if you have, comment down below and tell me that you actually know more than I think you know. I'm gonna give you an exercise that I believe is one of the best movements to bulletproof your hamstring, okay? So you can do all the good mornings that you want. You can do all this other stuff that you want. But this is an exercise, because of the speed and because of what we're focusing on, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's known as a razor curl. And so we want to hold this hip flexion, okay? And sometimes I'm not the best here. I get a little bit lazy where my chest will start to come up, but we want to hold hip flexion and knee flexion. And the whole goal here is I come out and back in. Now, one key thing too is that as you work through multiple sets, try and change the angle of your foot. If we change the angle of the foot, different heads of the hamstring are gonna get used. There's 3 heads there, okay? So if we go internally, now we're gonna recruit a little bit more in a different angle, okay? And those foot positions and the speed, holding hip flexion, okay? Hip flexion until you extend entirely. So now we're gonna extend, and then as we get to a full hip extension, we want to flex our knees. And the way that the knees will flex is by having our hamstrings pull us back in. That's where the rapid muscular action comes into play. So the hamstrings are predominantly fast twitch. So we've got to train them that way to get a really, really good response from them. That's why I love the razor curl. I recommend doing this once a week because it can be intense, but you could do 5, 6, 7 sets of 5 to 8 reps. And one of those tricks that you can do is time the set. Do 2 or 3 sets at a normal tempo, and then try and work some speed. When you work some speed, I'm telling you right now, as your hamstrings get more swole, there is nothing, well, there's one other exercise which you're gonna see shortly, the best exercise, but this movement is absolutely phenomenal for bulletproofing your hamstring. Okay, the #1 exercise for hamstrings, and this is an exercise that my fastest running backs, my fastest sprinters, my fastest athletes all mastered and were able to execute very, very rapidly, and we rarely had hamstring issues. Very, very, very rarely do we have hamstring issues. Now, I also believe this is a key predictor for speed. If you have a younger athlete and you can develop them to utilize this movement early on and master it early on, I do believe it ends up carrying over really well. I don't care what anybody says about isometric action during sprinting. If they can't do this movement, which is not isometric, then I believe that there's still gonna be some hamstring issues when they're sprinting. And that movement, I like to call hamstring pulls, but most people will call Nordic hamstrings, okay? And so this is a poor man's glute ham here from Sorinex, and we wanna tuck the hamstrings in. Now, I can tell you right now, there's no chance of me actually being able to do this perfectly on my first try. But what we wanna do is we wanna start upright. And the key is a lot of guys, when they do the concentric portion coming backwards, they like to flex a little bit at the hips. So the whole goal is that we keep that chest upright. Another key factor is that focusing on that eccentric portion can help us execute a little bit more through the concentric portion. Another factor that I also believe goes into play is that as your athletes get more explosive and as they get more coordinated, if they can start from that bottom position and come up, they will be absolute phenom athletes. It's really, really difficult to do that. And another factor that we're gonna throw in here is that if you can't do this, you can hook a band behind you and use that band, and then that's how you can progress into executing this a little bit more effectively. So ideally, and I'm gonna flex at the hip right away because I'm not that good at these, is that you wanna see, and this is where, right here on my hamstring, I don't know if you can see this, right here on my hamstring, okay, right here might cramp into my calf. That's what you're gonna see with younger athletes early on who have hamstrings that don't coordinate very, very well. So we're gonna come down, nice and easy. We can even get just a little bit of a pop and come up, and we want to try and keep that chest up, okay? So I'm gonna go down, control. Let's see. I'll try and get one for everybody, but I know for a fact I'm gonna be sore just from doing those two right there, okay? Okay, I cheated there, but you can see the whole point. If you can do that Nordic hamstring, and I recommend with your younger athletes, you can utilize Nordic hamstrings twice a week. With your more advanced athletes, I would only utilize it once a week because it can really get sore. So you've got to also periodize your programming with your hamstrings around when they might be sprinting so that they're not getting banged up. They don't have really, really sore hamstrings and the next day they have to go out and run some sprints. So utilize this once a week with your advanced athletes, twice a week with your younger athletes. Make sure you focus on different positions and different tempos. It's gonna drastically improve the strength of your hamstrings and 100% bulletproof your hamstrings. If you need help with a hamstring-based program, a program that's gonna utilize your hamstrings to run faster, click on the link down below. You can head over to garagestrength.com and you can pick up our Sprinter strength training program. It's gonna help you learn how to coordinate your hamstrings into that top end speed. If you want more content around training for speed and training for different body parts, click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.